More of the same for the king.
Yes, sir.
What news from the gaming table?
Very good. Alberto's having a fantastic time.
Good evening, Mrs. Adams.
I think the door's unlocked. Your sister and her husband stopped by. I let them in as usual.
What would you do if your assistant was secretly spying on you? That was the reality for Judy Garland, and it's just one of the unbelievable punishments Hollywood stars endured behind the scenes. Shocking but true, children in old Hollywood were punished by being forced to sit on blocks of ice. What other cruel punishments were stars forced to endure in the name of fame? Number 25. Actors had to duke it out for the best roles. In old Hollywood, one bad role could ruin your career. Some stars even earned the infamous title of box office poison. After all, a series of subpar roles could lead to labels that were hard to shake. The Independent Theater Owners Association of America labeled Marlene Dietrich, Greta Garbo, and Katharine Hepburn box office poison in the mid-1930s. Hepburn eventually navigated herself out of the situation, but not every actress could. Number 24. Actors couldn't refuse parts.
Good evening, Mrs. Adams.
I think the door's unlocked. Your sister and her husband stopped by. I let them in as usual.
To get out of here. Get out!
Imagine being punished just for saying no. Bette Davis fought back but paid a heavy price for her defiance. During the studio system, it was unheard of for an actor to refuse a part, because doing so often had severe consequences. In fact, Bette Davis was suspended by Warner Brothers for turning down roles.
When? I'll explain it to you. I bought the house you're living in. You promised to pay me back, remember?
Being locked into long-term contracts with their studios, actors had virtually no say when it came to whatever roles were assigned to them. According to Into Film, while many stars were unwilling to go against the system, the heiress actor, Olivia de Havilland, that boldly decided to rebel against Warner Brothers, the studio which signed her in 1935, making a legendary change to the Hollywood system. What bothered me was playing one-dimensional parts in films, de Havilland once told Entertainment Weekly, adding, "Those roles were intended simply to fill the routine function of the girl."
Where would we get money like that? Well, you could print it if I'd only thought to give Roy a printing press. Oh, you're tired. You wouldn't say things.
As such, the A-lister began declining roles and found herself suspended from the studio without pay. She was off screen for almost 2 years, and she wasn't even 30 yet. Author Emily Carmen told the outlet, "This is the prime of her career." Yet de Havilland was relentless, and with the knowledge that her lawyer father gave her, she took Warner Brothers to court and won. Per Reuters, the result was the de Havilland Law, a 7-year rule on contracts, aka Labor Code Section 2855. Which ultimately helped bring down the old studio system. As Victoria Amador, author of Olivia de Havilland, Lady Triumphant, told Entertainment Weekly, it was a major brick in the downfall of the control of the studio system. Number 23. Even if studios knew the movies were bombs. Imagine knowing your own movie is destined to flop, but you're still forced to star in it. When Louis B. Mayer, co-founder of MGM, wanted to break his contract with actor John Gilbert, he planted rumors about the star and reportedly intentionally put him in bad movies. As a result, Gilbert's career tanked. Louis B. Mayer was the co-founder of the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM Studios. He had a great eye for talent and made MGM one of the biggest movie studios of old Hollywood. Mayer was also totally ruthless. When silent cinema was transitioning to sound, Mayer needed to dump actor John Gilbert. He was too expensive, and the men often clashed over both creative and financial matters. In order to make sure that Gilbert did not make the transition to talkies, Mayer planted stories in fan magazines stating that the actor's high-pitched voice was causing great distress on the movie lot. Mayer also cast Gilbert in several films that he knew were complete bombs. After the bad press and poor reviews, Gilbert left MGM in 1933. He is considered one of the most popular actors to never make the talkie transition. Number 22. They had to take acting classes. Studios saw potential, but that didn't mean actors could coast. Imagine being forced into acting school. Sometimes studios saw potential in an actor or actress even before they could prove their acting chops. So it was common for up-and-coming stars who already signed contracts with major studios to take acting classes. Although appearances meant practically everything in old Hollywood, that didn't mean that just any pretty face could act. In fact, studios were willing to dish out big bucks for acting classes for their aspiring A-listers.
I like watermelon, but it wets my ears. Sing Polly Wolly Doodle Holiday, baby.
As Shirley Temple revealed in her book Child Star, while she was still a rising star in Tinseltown in the early 1930s, Fox executive Winfried R. Sheenan told her and her mother that due to the youngster's potential, they demanded she take acting lessons, even if they risked the expensive price tag to do so.
Was it you who kissed me?
You're talking. You're alive.
Well, of course I'm alive. What did you think I was?
Ava Gardner was also asked to take classes after signing her initial contract with MGM. According to the Los Angeles Times, when she took her first screen test with a studio, an official allegedly declared, "She can't act, she didn't talk, she's sensational." Along with her acting lessons, the Mogambo star was also asked to take vocal lessons to get rid of her southern accent. Vocal training was also given to Lauren Bacall, with her low, seductive voice becoming her signature. As the star herself revealed in her memoir, By Myself, director Howard Hawks was the one who instructed her to read out loud by herself. He felt it most important to keep the voice in a low register, she recalled, noting that Hawks told her, "When a woman gets excited or emotional, there's nothing more unattractive than screeching."
Tired of expensive, low-effort script writers for your YouTube channel? Autoscripter.ai is the ultimate solution. Say goodbye to low-quality, poorly retention amateur scripts that fail to generate thousands of views for your channel. At a fraction of the cost, Autoscripter.ai helps your videos go viral. In just 3 steps, Autoscripter.ai creates a polished script tailored to your needs. Just input your title concept, select your tone and style. The intuitive interface makes editing and refining effortless, fast, smart, and trusted by hundreds of satisfied users who have already discovered the amazing tool. Start your free trial today and watch Autoscripter.ai transform your YouTube channel. Just click the link in the video description below now.
Number 21. Actors had to use studio assistants.
If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow.
Imagine being betrayed by someone you trusted completely. Judy Garland found out in the most heartbreaking way. Studios often appointed assistants to their actors, who would advise and take care of the stars. They would also report back to the studio and essentially act as spies. Judy Garland was reportedly devastated when she found out her nanny had been betraying her. With so many rules set in place by old Hollywood studios to keep their stars in check, one must wonder, how on earth didn't they miss anything that happened behind closed doors? Ingenious as always, or callous by today's standards, studios hired spies, and they could be anyone, compiling reports on their stars from studio drivers, waiters, and janitors.
Delight you, and it excites you, and it invites you to wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind.
As detailed in Get Happy, The Life of Judy Garland, Garland's assistant, Betty Asher, was fooling her for years. As Garland herself once shared, Asher would actually give a report to MGM once a week, detailing exactly who the author would see, her eating habits, and if she was out too late in the evening. I can remember crying for days after I found out what she was doing to me, Garland reflected. Interestingly enough, it wasn't just screen stars who had their lives painstakingly scrutinized.
Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell. Zing.
According to Hollywood Works, How Creativity Became Labor in the Studio System, movie directors were also kept a close eye on while a film was in production to make sure the studio's best interests for the flick were going according to plan. To do this, filmmakers were spied on by production assistants, line producers, and script clerks. Number 20. Appearance was everything. Being talented wasn't enough. You had to be camera perfect at all times. Weight, posture, and even surgeries were part of the deal. Studios wanted to make sure their actresses were always ready to be photographed, as Hollywood had a looks-over-talent philosophy at the time. It was standard for weight maintenance to be included into contracts. Looks over talent was Hollywood's philosophy. An actor was groomed, chiseled, and molded to have a screen presence. They were given diction lessons and schooled on posture, and took horseback riding, fencing, and dance lessons. Appearance was hugely important. Weight maintenance was standard in contracts. Physical fitness was strictly enforced. What couldn't be worked off was surgically altered. If a nose was too big or a chin too wide, plastic surgery was a given. A star is made, created, carefully and cold-bloodedly built up from nothing, said Louis B. Mayer. All I ever looked for was a face. If someone looked good to me, I'd have him tested. If a person looked good on film, if he photographed well, we could do the rest. Number 19. Diets were often restricted. Imagine being told what to eat every day for your career. The strict diets of old Hollywood were shocking. Studios would place actresses on strict diets if they gained weight. Marlene Dietrich followed a diet of broth, cottage cheese, and toast dictated by her studio. There's a reason why seemingly every female star from Hollywood's golden age had a slim figure. They weren't allowed to gain weight. As explained in Racked, gained weight was actually forbidden when a star was signed, and it was even written into their contracts. In fact, fresh faces were closely examined by studio execs, and then potentially given a dietitian before a studio would begin heavily promoting their work. Heartbreakingly enough, studios weren't even discreet with what they expected from their A-listers, sometimes even acting downright cruel. Per biography, Judy Garland was nicknamed a fat little pig with pigtails by MGM execs, with studio head Louis B. Mayer demanding the actor consume only chicken soup, black coffee, and cigarettes, along with pills to keep her figure. Swedish-born actor Greta Garbo was also hit with a blunt realization when she made it to Hollywood in 1925, with Mayer allegedly telling her, "In America, we don't like fat women." As silent movie expert Pamela Hutchinson told the outlet, Garbo ate nothing but spinach for 3 weeks. Along with dieting, female actors also had to try and remain active. According to Harper's Bazaar, Marilyn Monroe was keen on weightlifting, in a time when it still wasn't the norm in Hollywood. Speaking to Pageant in 1952, the actor revealed, "I spend at least 10 minutes each morning working out with small weights." Number 18. Actors often had to change their appearance. Imagine being told your face isn't good enough. Some actors had to go through painful procedures just to get cast. Louis B. Mayer, co-founder of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios, or MGM, once declared, "A star is made, created, carefully and cold-bloodedly built up from nothing." And sure enough, that's precisely what Hollywood was doing during its golden age. The iconic producer noted that all he initially looked for in a future star was their face, and if they could look good on camera. As he revealed, "We could do the rest." Sure enough, future A-listers had to be willing to change their appearance and sometimes their entire image. Along with changing her original Hispanic last name, Cancino, Rita Hayworth also went through a rigorous physical change. She was subject to 2 years of painful electrolysis to change her low brow, dark hairline. On the other hand, Marilyn Monroe was also manufactured into the blonde bombshell she's forever remembered as. Born Norma Jean Mortensen, Monroe actually had dark brown curls when she first began her climb to Tinseltown elite, with modeling agency head Emmeline Snively once telling her, "Look, darling, if you really intend to go places in this business, you've just got to bleach and straighten your hair because now your face is a little too round." Old Hollywood was also a supporter of expansive plastic surgery, which still wasn't common at the time, and even as early as the 1920s, nose jobs and facelifts were being performed. Number 17. Actors had to be willing to change their names. Imagine having to change your name and identity just to fit into Hollywood. And this was the standard for many stars. What did Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, and Natalie Wood all have in common? Their legendary A-list names were all created by the studios that built them into the stars they're remembered as today. As The Guardian writes, during the time of Hollywood's golden age, it was standard practice for an actor's name to be changed, and the reasons were endless. While Gilda Lead Rita Hayworth was viewed as an all-American bombshell, her birth name was Margarita Cancino, as her father was Spanish while her mother was Irish-American. Forced to change her name to appear more Anglo-sounding, her transformation eliminated most traces of her ethnicity. Joan Crawford, on the other hand, was born Lucille LeSueur, and according to The Guardian, her name change came by way of an MGM studio exec who said that her last name reminded her of a sewer. According to the Star Machine, Crawford allegedly loathed her given stage name, which reminded her of crawfish. But it wasn't just female screen stars who had to change their names. Men weren't excused from this practice either. Cary Grant, for example, was actually Archibald Alexander Leach and was given his new identity by Paramount Studios. Number 16. Backstories were created to boost an actor's persona. Imagine your entire life story being fabricated. Old Hollywood went to great lengths to craft the perfect image. Women were primarily limited to all-American girls next door or sexy bombshell typecasting. Studios went to great lengths to market those images to their audience, sometimes even making up fake backstories for their talent. It's no secret that old Hollywood stars were usually typecast, but it turns out that sometimes their entire image was carefully crafted too. As Racht explained, studios' publicity departments went to great lengths to create backstories for their future A-listers. According to FSR, Joan Crawford, born Lucille LeSueur, came from a rough upbringing, yet MGM made sure to completely hide her past, even telling the press that she came from an upper-class family. In fact, they released a public contest to pick her name. Tiring of the social life of a debutante, the ad and movie weekly read, she left home to become an actress. Backstories and lies continued well into an actor's career as well. Per Timeline, when Judy Garland became pregnant, MGM didn't want to ruin her innocent image, so they ordered her to take more speed after her weight gain, while her publicist dished to the tabloids that she ate like a truck driver. If anything, at least the actors were self-aware of the inevitable truth that they were typecast. Per The Independent, Gilda Lead Rita Hayworth couldn't ever shake off her femme fatale image, causing her to groan, "Every man I knew went to bed with Gilda and woke up with me." Cary Grant, on the other hand, who was born Archibald Alexander Leach, once deplored, "Everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant." Number 15. Their love lives were often arranged. Imagine being forced into a fake relationship just to promote a movie. Studios did this more often than you'd think. Sham dates, as they were called back then, were a way for a studio to drum up publicity for upcoming pictures featuring their stars. While promoting Babes in Arms, Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland acted like a couple, but in real life, Rooney was a well-known playboy. While the movies made during Hollywood's golden age were filled with glitz and glam and A-listers swooning for one another, behind the scenes, a fairy tale ending wasn't that easy to come by. It turns out studios actually had a lot to say when it came to an actor's love life. When Boys Town star Mickey Rooney went to MGM and declared he was going to marry Ava Gardner in 1942, studio head Louis B. Mayer bluntly told him, "I simply forbid it. That's all. I forbid it." Although Rooney was eventually allowed a very private wedding, others weren't as lucky. According to Scandals of Classic Hollywood, there was a rumor that Jean Harlow allegedly couldn't marry William Powell because MGM had written a clause into her contract forbidding her to marry. For LGBTQ actors, it was even more challenging. As Stephen Tropiano, professor of screen studios at Ithaca College, told History, studios would actually have arranged marriages between one or more gay, lesbian, or bisexual people in order to hide their sexual orientation from the public. Number 14, even some marriages were orchestrated. Imagine being forced into a marriage just to protect your public image. Rock Hudson had no choice. Sadly, studios forced many LGBTQ actors into heterosexual marriages. The studio forced Hollywood hunk and sex symbol Rock Hudson to marry Phyllis Gates in 1955. Hollywood insiders knew that Hudson was gay. However, it was kept a secret in order to preserve Hudson's leading man status. Hudson was a box office star and dreamy romantic lead. If news got out about his sexuality, it would definitely ruin his bankable career. Hudson's marriage to Gates lasted only 3 years. He was one of the first major celebrities to die from AIDS. Before his death in 1985, the actor publicly came out about his sexuality. Number 13, and sometimes unions were forbidden. Imagine being told you can't marry someone because it might hurt your career. Jean Harlow found out the hard way. Jean Harlow was told that becoming a wife would alter her sex appeal, and, due to the morality clause in her contract with MGM, the studio was allowed to deny her marriage to William Powell. The actress also reportedly became pregnant from an affair. According to E.J. Fleming's The Fixers, Eddie Mannix, Howard Strickling, and the MGM publicity machine, someone by the name of Mrs. Jean Carpenter checked into Good Shepherd Hospital to get some rest. In the name of total Hollywood discretion, Mrs. Carpenter was only seen by private doctors. Number 12, tarnishing one's reputation was inexcusable. Imagine being one of the biggest stars in the world, only to have rumors destroy your career. Clara Bow was Hollywood royalty in the 1920s, famously dubbed the It Girl for her magnetic screen presence. She was the epitome of the flapper girl image, rebellious and glamorous. However, the darker side of fame eventually caught up with her. As the studios worked hard to craft perfect, squeaky clean images for their stars, any hint of scandal could bring down a career. Unfortunately for Bow, rumors about her personal life began to surface, painting her as promiscuous and reckless. What started as gossip soon escalated into something more sinister. Whispers of wild parties, affairs, and inappropriate behavior flooded the tabloids, and the studio system, always eager to protect their bottom line, swiftly distanced itself from Bow. Paramount Pictures, which had signed her to a contract, dropped her like a hot potato. The rumors tarnished her reputation to the point where it became impossible for her to recover. Number 11, they had to adhere to the production code. Imagine your whole career being controlled by what was deemed acceptable. The production code was ruthless. Since 1934, there was a strict production code that censored films. Actors and studios had to adhere to the requirements set forth by the Hays Office, which banned curse words, sex, and more. Some of the rules put forth by the censorship were about on-screen kisses, as they were not meant to look too lustful, which meant that they couldn't last longer than 3 seconds. Which explains all of those intense but short lip locks in old movies. Number 10, and lovers couldn't get too comfortable. Think filming a romantic scene is all steamy and glamorous? Well, the 1 foot on the floor rule changed that. In old Hollywood, romance on screen wasn't exactly as passionate as it seemed. Thanks to the strict production code that governed films starting in 1934, even married couples couldn't get too close during love scenes. The 1 foot on the floor rule required that actors in intimate scenes keep 1 foot firmly planted, ensuring they wouldn't look too horizontal or, heaven forbid, lustful. This rule wasn't just applied to casual romances or love affairs. It extended to films where the actors played married couples too. So, if you have ever noticed that bedroom scenes from the golden age of Hollywood seem oddly tame, well, that's why. There was a deliberate effort to keep things modest, even when the storylines called for passion. That led to some strange choreography in romantic moments, with actors contorting themselves to make scenes look intimate while abiding by the code. No wonder so many on-screen kisses were short and, frankly, a little awkward. Number 9. Even married couples had to follow the rules. Even real-life married couples had to play by the rules. Imagine being forced to sleep in separate beds on screen. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz may have been one of Hollywood's most famous married couples both on and off the screen, but even they weren't exempt from the strict rules of the production code. On the groundbreaking show I Love Lucy, the real-life couple played married TV characters, but the code required them to sleep in separate beds. Yes, you read that right. No matter how happily married you were in reality, if you played a couple on TV or in movies, you had to follow the bizarre rule that prohibited showing couples in the same bed together. This rule wasn't just about keeping things family-friendly for television. It was part of a broader mandate to control how romance and intimacy were portrayed on screen during Hollywood's golden age. The implication was that even in marriage, sexual intimacy was something that shouldn't be overtly acknowledged in media. So while Lucy and Ricky might have shared plenty of laughs, they certainly weren't sharing a bed on TV. It was a surreal contrast, especially considering how much I Love Lucy pushed other boundaries, like showing Lucy pregnant on television, a rarity for the time. But even then, some taboos were too big for 1950s television to break. Number 8. They had to sign long-term contracts. Imagine being locked into one studio for years. For actors, breaking free was nearly impossible. Today, actors and actresses can work on one movie with one studio, then move on to a new studio for their next movie. But it was common during the Golden Age for film studios to discover a talent and sign them to 4 to 7 year contracts. All of this was done to protect a major studio's own economic interests. As the outlet notes, these contracts meant an actor could only work with one particular studio, locking them down for years to come. Although, in the beginning, it would seem that these stars were handsomely paid. The New Yorker states that some Hollywood greats were making as much as $5,000 a week. As an actor's popularity grew, their salary didn't rise, all thanks to the contracts put in place. But it wasn't just actors who were placed under contract. According to Hollywood Lexicon, nobody was exempt, and even directors, writers, producers, and cinematographers, art directors, and technicians, they were all asked to sign on a dotted line. As Hollywood Lexicon explains, this studio self-sufficiency made everything in the production stage that much easier, even if it meant that some of the props and sets were a bit more inferior than they could have been. Number 7. They couldn't work with other studios while on contract. Imagine losing a dream role because you couldn't work with another studio. And that was the reality for many stars. Depending on the projects an actor's studio backed and the opportunities they pegged for that star, this stipulation could make or break a career. Since stars of Hollywood's golden age signed contracts with specific film studios, this meant that they had to remain loyal to their company and subsequently missed out on roles with competitors. Per Into Film, although actors were very well looked after, it also made it difficult for A-listers to branch out and take different roles, as they had an image to maintain. That being said, on occasion, some actors were allowed to be taken out on loan to other studios for specific flicks, although the parent studio would ensure that they were always a credit to the studio they represented. Number 6. But talent could be loaned to other studios. Imagine begging your studio to loan you out just to get a role you loved. Elizabeth Taylor was known for instigating loans from her studio, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM, so that she could work on more complex film, including Giant, A Place in the Sun, and Suddenly Last Summer. Elizabeth Taylor was under contract with MGM until 1960, yet they allowed her to pick different projects with other studios. And they weren't the usual fare she made with MGM either, touching on daring themes such as pregnancy out of wedlock or homosexuality and cannibalism. Others, such as Olivia de Havilland of Gone with the Wind fame, didn't have the same luck. Per Entertainment Weekly, de Havilland, who signed with Warner Brothers in 1935, was sick of the one-dimensional roles she was repeatedly forced to play and began declining parts the studio thrust upon her. The punishment? As author Emily Carman told Entertainment Weekly, de Havilland was essentially blacklisted from the industry, with Warner Brothers even going as far as to tell other studios not to hire her. Number 5, there was no limit to how much actors had to work, and it was sometimes cruel. Imagine working 18-hour days with little to no time off, all while being fed pills to keep you going. Judy Garland lived just that. The golden age of Hollywood churned out movies at a meteoric rate. According to Britannica, over 7,500 feature films were made by studios between 1930 and 1945. Of course, to produce that many flicks, actors were pushed to the brink of exhaustion, since there was no limit put in place to how much a star could work. Per history, the solution that studios had to keep their A-listers working was simple: feed them pills. As 20th Century Fox Dr. Lee Siegel explained in Goddess, The Secret Lives of Marilyn Monroe, it was the norm to use pills as a tool to keep stars working, adding that by the early 1950s, everyone was using pills. Perhaps the most well-known example of this exploitation was Judy Garland. Per Timeline, the Wizard of Oz star only had one day off a week, with sometimes 18-hour shifts of constantly singing and dancing. To keep her awake, studios fed her amphetamine uppers, while in the evenings she was given sleeping pills. Tragically, when Garland tried calling in sick or tried going to therapy or to hospital, the filming delays would come out of her paycheck, and she once owed MGM $100,000. At the age of 47 years old, Garland died of a drug overdose. Number 4, getting time off was subject to the studio. Imagine being forced back to work just 24 hours after your wedding. Julie Garland didn't even get a honeymoon. Judy Garland was one of the most beloved stars in Hollywood's golden age, but her life behind the scenes was far from glamorous. MGM, the studio that managed her career, was notorious for its tight control over Garland's schedule and personal life. When she married composer David Rose in 1941, Garland must have hoped for a moment of peace, or at least a short break from her relentless work schedule. But MGM had other plans. Instead of allowing her time to celebrate her new marriage, the studio forced her to return to work just 24 hours after her wedding. There was no honeymoon, just a quick ceremony and back to business as usual. For Garland, this was yet another example of the studio's total dominance over her life. She had already endured grueling 18-hour workdays, was fed diet pills to control her weight, and was constantly pressured to meet impossible beauty standards. Her personal happiness was always secondary to the studio's demands. The stress and exhaustion eventually took their toll, contributing to her struggles with addiction and emotional breakdowns. Even in moments that should have been joyful, like her wedding, the studio never let her forget who was in control. Number 3, and sick days were a punishable event. Imagine being docked pay for being too sick to work. Judy Garland's paycheck was cut by $100,000 for calling in sick. Judy Garland's time at MGM is often remembered for the grueling demands the studio placed on her, and her struggle to maintain her health only made things worse. Garland, who had been given amphetamines to keep her going through long hours on set, eventually developed severe exhaustion and addiction problems. Despite this, MGM showed little compassion. During the filming of Meet Me in St. Louis, Garland called in sick a total of 16 days, unable to physically or mentally handle the workload. Instead of offering her support, the studio punished her by docking her pay. This wasn't just a small cut either. Production delays caused by Garland's absence were deducted from her salary, leaving her in a financial hole that reached an astounding $100,000. Even as Garland's health deteriorated, MGM's main concern was the bottom line. Number 2, even children knew not to waste the studio's time. Imagine being punished as a child actor by being forced to sit on a block of ice. Even child stars weren't spared. Shirley Temple learned from a young age that it was never a good idea to be unprofessional on set. Time is money. Wasted time means wasted money means trouble, she wrote in her book Child Star. Temple related how child stars in the 1930s were punished by being forced to sit on a block of ice. Child performers were sent to the black box when they misbehaved on set. As Temple recalled, "So far as I can tell, the black box did no lasting damage to my psyche." Number 1, studios had rules against children too. Imagine having to terminate a pregnancy just to keep your job. Many actresses had no choice but to comply. Actresses knew that becoming pregnant was against most studio rules, and as a result, some women, like Ava Gardner, had abortions to prevent penalties. MGM had all sorts of penalty clauses about their stars having babies, Gardner revealed in her autobiography, Ava, My Story. Abortions were relatively commonplace, though a closely guarded secret, during the so-called Golden Age of Hollywood, which spanned from the 1910s to the early 1960s. Seen as a necessary body maintenance, as one anonymous female actor told the magazine, abortions were our birth control. It was called the Golden Age because, according to the Arcadia Publishing, filmmakers continually expanded what could be done in cinema. New technologies were constantly being developed and utilized, and there was much innovation and creativity in the developing industry. It was also a time of great power for the handful of production companies that controlled the industry. Those companies, including MGM, Paramount, and 20th Century Fox, held all the cards regarding aspiring stars' and starlets' dreams of being on the silver screen. In order to achieve their movie star goals, actors had to sign lengthy contracts that included controlling many aspects of their personal lives, Harper's Bazaar reported, including the stipulation that young starlets could not become pregnant, as the studio companies wanted their star actresses to either be perceived as sex symbols or the girl next door, Ginger or Mary Ann, and motherhood didn't jibe with either of those perceptions. If you thought Hollywood's golden age was glamorous, think again. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed uncovering these dark secrets, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking tales. Check out our other videos to dive deeper into old Hollywood scandals.